going private or something or whatever it was, right? And he got sued for that from...
Yeah, he tweeted about potentially getting private investment from Saudi Arabia, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like a perfect PR trick, isn't it?
And also when they launched Cybertruck, when they broke the glass. If you want to be really cynical, was that planned? Because,
exactly.
I mean, that generated probably billions of dollars in value in PR.
Probably 10 times more like media coverage.
And the interesting part is a little bit like, oh, that's bad PR. Well, is it?
Is it though?
Yeah.
To buy that coverage?
Yeah.
You can't.
It's like a Swedish Bert Karlsson, any PR is good PR, but I think Elon Musk has a bit more, strategy behind it than Bert Karlsson, perhaps.
Yeah, a little bit more of a concrete product and promise than Bert Karlsson, maybe.
Okay, so the launch of Starship 9, that happened yesterday, or was it this week? Or?
Yesterday or the day before, depending on time.
You were following it, or you've been?
Yeah, I've been following the scrubs as well. So I watched the live stream.
Mm. So it went up and it flew for how long?
I think it's just a few minutes, but it goes up, but on less engines than it's supposed to, and then it hovers and it does the belly flop.
Yeah.
Going like sideways down to reduce speed, and then attempting to flip over and land safely. Yeah. And I think what they're experimenting with right now is to get that to work, but it exploded again.
Like the previous one, right?
Yeah, like the previous one.
And as you said, like it's quite amazing how Elon is setting a standard that he's completely visible or transparent, or with himself trying. And everybody's, as you also said, cheering on it. It's like it's a new mentality. It says something about, we need to try, we need to learn. It's part of the game.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's brilliant PR and marketing and brand building to involve and create ambassadors. And also, obviously, that's what he did with Tesla, start from the top, to have people who are very influential to buy in to the brand.
Yeah. The go-to-market plan that he has, and I think, PR and communication-wise, it's really hard to think of anyone. Perhaps Apple can, in some ways, top that at some point, but I think the transparency that he seems to have, at least, with showing failures as well, and not like turning statistics around in weird ways,
but Tesla, it's a new level because he's doing it so it feels so casual. He's tweeting, he's doing his demos and all that, and everybody's just genuinely curious. So it doesn't feel like a marketing ploy at all.
That's the trick, isn't it?
And isn't that the trick, right?
You're the expert here.
I think in his case, and this is just my guess, I think it's all about him really believing and hoping that he can do this in this time frame he states it. But then I think he's so rational and just sees it purely engineering, and he's not afraid of failing.
And did you see the first? Have you seen the one? Did you do the first autonomous drive from LA to San Francisco?
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, it's a YouTube clip where basically it's him talking at the investors or like a press release, and then it's like sped up how you see a car. And basically, he's talking about the technology. He's talking about what he has promised, and like this. And he doesn't come across like a marketing guy. He comes across like an engineer with his baby that wants to make this work. And it's like, I'm going to make it work. You didn't think I'm going to make it work with the roaster? I delivered like this. And he's completely transparent of the tweaks and tricks and and why it's hard or not. And it's so I feel it's authentic. Even if he's doing it marketing wise or if it's real, it goes through, right?
Yeah, I think
fantastic.
I think you're putting your finger on what's the key there. That he's so passionate, and that shines through. If you're trained to just deliver a message, people won't be touched.
These days, many people are wondering.
I would say it's actually also really well thought through the way he actually communicates with the media. But who knows? For sure, he is very knowledgeable and authentic, as you say.
But I believe I think there are some very smart strategic plays going on here. It's very tactically placed, all this. But since he's coming across the way he's doing it, and if you hear his launches, I mean, like if Steve Jobs was the perfect Aristotle rhetorics and with the perfect flow, he stumbles on words, you know.
Exactly.
He doesn't care, but it works, right? Because it's this. So I think it's super. I think it's choreographed, you know, it's strategically placed, but the way he does it, I think it shines through with the passion that I think works really well.
Well, speaking of people that's great in communicating in whatever way they do it, welcome here, Kye.
Thank you.
You know, we've met a number of times, of course, and worked together and done so many awesome things, you know, meeting politicians, Almedalen, of course, and meeting politicians in the Swedish parliament, and it's been a lot of fun in so many ways. And in some way, you always have this ability to, I think, make people feel safe in some way.
Well, I don't know about that. I try to. I think it's a lot about communicating, and I think I take that from you as well, being able to, with the lack of better words, dumb it down and make it easy.
Yeah. Short, I think actually you are one of the best communicators I've ever met and seen. So it's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thanks.
Kye. And how would you describe yourself if you were to give a quick background about yourself?
Oh, wow. I think that the question, what you do for a living, is becoming increasingly hard, because to put a title on yourself is increasingly hard as you do more and more things. But I started back in '99 in the web agency world as a web developer and designer, and worked for 20 years in the agency world in communications, but mainly digitally, building products and services. And now when I think back at it, I realize I worked for a very long time trying to come up with new ideas and change the way other people worked and face that fear and the resistance of fear.
Yeah, you have so many awesome quotes that I've heard and learned from you, and I hope we can go through a couple of them later.
Oh, we like quotes that can be turned into T-shirts. That's been our gimmick.
And I like making T-shirts.
We have.
Yeah,
so
perfect
we have
match.
a couple of. We have a short list of T-shirts as one of the ways how we closed the season finale last year.
Wow.
What's our T-shirt quotes? And it's up to you, Goran. We still need a couple of T-shirts.
I'm looking for a sponsor first.
Sponsor first, and then maybe we'll have some prizes coming up. I don't know. But please back.
We'll fix it.
Yeah, so agency world, and you work always with a bit of digital communication, right? Or
Yeah, digital advertising for a long period of time that eventually turned into digital business transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, we started at one agency, one of the top agencies in Sweden, doing banners. 8 years later, we were business consultants working with boards and management groups, helping them transform into the digital world. And I still remember H&M being kind of flabbergasted that we suggested they should start working online.
yeah, really?
Yeah.
What year was this approximately?
A long time ago, I think 2006 or something like that. Or
I
even
know I had
earlier.
some discussion with IKEA at that time as well. You know, they should actually sell stuff online. They're like, no way, it's going to be the paper magazine that's going to stick forever.
But it's interesting. I mean, it's the same cycle, but it is just sped up now.
And now the cycle of AI.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same cycle as AI, where back then everyone was like, no, digital, that's just something that IT can do. And now AI, that's something that our research or IT department should do.
Yeah, it's like what really drives innovation. It starts in a corner, the outlier, and builds up to be becoming mainstream. But you never know which one of the outliers is actually going to work. But you have to keep finding these outliers, and otherwise you will be overrun, I guess, by other people that invent more.
And I must ask, what's your schooling before you started the agency world?
No, I just finished high school. Me and my friends started a web agency when we were in...
So you're the entrepreneur school.
Yeah, exactly. When we were 17, we had to go to my friend's mom who worked at a bank and get approval to start a company.
So you've done the entrepreneurial.
Yeah, for a short while, and then I joined the big agency world, where that network formed of people who now know each other, but are in all tech companies in Sweden, which I think happens now again, which is fantastic to see, but almost globally, because there's so few, and you get to know each other, and all of a sudden...
And are we on the peak of the internet bubble now, like 99, 2000, or is it earlier or later?
Oh wow, I'm not sure about the bubble thing because I think the value is actually.
It wasn't a bubble, but when the first peak came,
Yeah.
if I flip it like that, I agree with you actually. It wasn't a bubble. It was
Really?
just.
It dropped like crazy in 2001.
It was a bubble in terms of inflated stock price value
Yes.
of a couple of companies. And it is typical hype curve, right? We peak and we try to do things that, on VAP phones. You remember that?
Yeah.
And now we're doing it by far much more. But of course, with the right tech has caught up and we have matured. So in this way, it's maybe the peak and then the classical trough and then back up to real productivity.
Yeah, no, I think definitely we're going to see that. I don't think the same. We're not going to fail, or people are not going to fail for the same reasons. I think
in AI, you mean?
No, in AI. But one thing I think differs is that if you pursue AI, a lot of other value will occur that are just pure digitization value,
Right.
which I think is sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what Corona has really helped with as well.
Yes, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you continue working with the agency world, and what was the next big steps that you made after that?
For the last few years in the agency world, we worked a lot with private equity and venture capital firms, kind of advising and working with their investments. We naturally came closer to that world. And then one of my creative directors was one of the partners who founded EQT Ventures.
Right.
So he asked me to come over and help Luca, the founder and CEO of Peltarion, with the narrative of one big presentation that he held at a huge investor meeting with 600 investors from all over the world.
Yeah.
So I worked with Luca for 2 weeks. I had never heard about AI, or I'd heard about AI, but I didn't have the notion about what it was. To me, it was science fiction. And then I worked with Luca for 2 weeks, and at the end of those 2 weeks, I told Luca, "Look, this is the most exciting thing I've ever heard of. I want to be part of it, no matter what." So I was the least casual, professional pitch ever.
Try to stay cool. No.
But this was back in 2016, or?
Yeah, 2016.
There was Luca, Måns, and who else was on the train at this point?
I mean, you were.
Yeah.
You, Daniel.
Yeah.
I think you were.
Lars, I think, was the
Lars,
first one.
Yeah. Deep Lars and Lars Mustache as well.
Lars Mustache.
Yeah.
I'm the 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before that, you also worked at Greatworks, right? So
Yeah, I worked for Greatworks for 8 years in total, 4 years in 2 different batches.
What do they do?
They used to be a digital advertising agency, ended up as a digital business transformation agency, and then kind of closed shop 3 years ago when they were incorporated into a bigger agency network.
And Daniel from Peltarion worked there as well?
Yeah,
right?
me and Daniel, who's head of development and engineering at Peltarion, we worked together at different agencies for over 10 years.
All right.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
It's a small world sometimes.
It is a small world, and then you meet people that you get energy from.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you joined Peltarion as well. And you started speaking about that, and you met Luca, and you helped him. What? To make a presentation to all the investors, you said? Or?
EQT has an annual investor meeting for all the big investors who invest in their funds.
Yeah.
And Luca was one of the main keynote speakers.
Yeah.
So Ted felt that he wanted to apply some advertising communication skills on top of the AI skills, and then we packaged and worked on that, which also was a great 2-week work interview, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
And then you started at Peltarion as well, and what do you work with mainly there? How would you describe that?
I was the brand and communication, head of brand and communication,
Yes.
so working with developing the brand and all the communication around it, the website, and working with the early sales materials. But very early also working very closely with you, running around the country and internationally, networking and trying to push things.
So many great moments there.
What are we talking about now? 2000 and...
I think already 2016, the fall, we had a few meetings with Swedish politicians.
Yes.
Right.
Because we discussed, like, okay, we're going to sell AI out of Sweden. Okay, probably Sweden needs to have an AI credibility.
Yes.
So what's our national AI strategy? And we went around and met with some politicians, and we came back realizing no one knew what AI was.
But can you try to give away some secrets? If you were to meet a politician or a person that may not know that much about AI, and you really want to explain it as in an authoritative way or a really clear way, without saying, you don't want to sell necessarily or make it sound like that, but really try to explain, because I think you do that so well. Do you have a trick, or how would you advise other people if they were to try to explain to someone else that this is a big thing? You should really, start thinking about this.
Oh, wow. I think try to imagine yourself in the other person's shoes, and also do the bar trick, which is
what?
The bar trick.
The bar trick.
If you can't speak like you're sitting in a bar, don't use that language. It must be natural. But I think most importantly, explain what AI can do. Take examples that people can understand and relate to. And that's something we've been struggling with, because a lot of the examples have been brain tumor segmentation and a lot of other stuff that's already super advanced to most people. So it's like, so we can do AI, we can do brain tumor segmentation a lot better with AI. Okay, so you're doing rocket science a little bit more advanced.
That's actually a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Why are we failing in communication?
Yeah. I remember a discussion I think it was with IT and Telecom, the branch organization, and I think you were part of it as well, and they had this kind of thing, AI is so awesome, but, for a hairdresser, in reality, what can AI really do for them? And I think you had such an awesome answer, and I said, of course they're going to use it. How much administration do they do? How many things can you do to find customers better? You could just enumerate a number of examples of ordinary working people and jobs and roles. Of course they have use of it. It's not a rocket science kind of technology. It's for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember? Was it? I'm not sure if I remember it correctly, but
I think it was that example, the IT and telecom.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first time I realized that there was some value to all those years in advertising, coming up with crazy ideas and understanding different challenges. But to me, it's been obvious from the start that everyone's going to be able to use it.
Yeah.
And especially when we're talking about text and BERT, which we're probably going to talk about more.
I would love to.
But I'm not sure we should go there now, but I really want to explore with you, is the way the whole IT industry is set up around talking about hype and talking about, inventing new cool acronyms, is that really helping communication or selling it, or is actually making it worse? Maybe we don't go there now, but I think this is a quite important topic. Should we go there now?
Yeah, sure.
You see what I mean? My understanding, and even what we want to do with this podcast is to demystify, is to talk plain language, and actually tell it for what it is. And over and over again, we get these inflated, science fiction storylines, or and it's is that helping? A lot of the marketing looks like that if you look at the big firms and the big vendors. And I think they are killing it. I think they're, making it worse. They're slowing it down. They're making it more obscure. They're making it harder for the customer to really understand. Okay, I get it. No big deal. It's difficult, but I kind of understand what I need to work on. Now they have no clue.
No, I think it's a very, very important area to discuss, and I think it's something that we're all guilty of. That's been around forever. The last 30 years, great to have been born a nerd and be tech, because you get to work with cool stuff and you're taken more seriously and not shoved down in the basement. But before that, there was probably business people using acronyms, trying to keep power to themselves by talking weird languages. And now once those who understand advanced maths, tech and IT come into power, they do the same. And then they alienate not only the other people, but also the CEOs who now know that they need AI, but they are too afraid to admit that they don't understand what the hell that top AI researcher is talking about.
I think this is this whole fundamental, we can talk about data literacy is one thing, but actually it's the other way around. Why do we need to work and use those words? It's actually part of the power game. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's once you reach a certain amount of power, it's very
influence.
Or influence is probably a more relatable word.
Yeah,
you're very comfortable, and you don't. But you also start to grow a fear of losing that influence. So you start protecting it, and once other people start to understand the same thing you do, you're diluting your own influence, right? And you have to be comfortable with that.
Yes.
And focus on the goal. Going back to Elon Musk, he's so focused on the goal, he doesn't care about diluting his own influence. It's because he also owns the company.
Cool. And you were very instrumental in one of the communication terms we use at Peltarion, which is operational AI. What do you think of, or how would you describe what operational AI is?
Well, it's an important distinction. Operationalizing AI, that means to have AI in production. Actually having AI models that deliver value in an organization, in a product that does the work. Helps amplifying the sound or identifying something, as opposed to doing research or a proof of concept project.
And we've spoken about the prototype graveyard a number of times before, and I think that's a classical counter-example, I guess, of what we don't want to do or don't want to do. I mean, you have so many companies claiming that they are using AI. They're claiming that they have a great value, and they even perhaps built a prototype that can show that, but very, very few actually can put it in production to provide true value. Right?
Yeah. And the whole idea, of course, is that if you don't have the mindset, then now we come to a T-shirt from Luca. If you don't commit to deploy, put it in production, you're actually not understanding the full 360 view of what you need to do. I mean, from a tech point of view, we have clear, to do a prototype or to do something in a sample environment is way different than to make it work production-wise in an enterprise. And even, try to sell it, get the legal aspects right. So if you don't have the mindset to commit to deploy, to go to production, you're only scratching. You're not really understanding what your new company or what your new setup is all about.
Yeah,
and I think it's in this, what Peltarion is doing to also basically focusing on actually this topic that go faster here that is most important, because it's not only that you get value from our stuff, but it's actually now you're really becoming data and AI ready for real.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, I came from a world of agency world, consultancy world, where user experience and end value was everything. How do we change something? And then we figured out the way there. And when I started working at Peltarion with Anders and a lot of researchers, I mean, I had never worked with academia or proper researchers. It was kind of a clash for me to understand that a goal and time plan, that's not prioritized concepts always. And I've come to understand the value also of having that freedom to push the edge and explore things, and how hard it is to get those two things together, because you need to be able to explore. But if you don't deliver ever, what's the value? And vice versa. If you only look at
small increments,
you're only going to do a faster and faster horse, always. But there's been so many times in Peltarion and outside Peltarion where someone has come, look, I've got this great idea. And I've asked, so what's this used for?
Exactly.
And the answer is, no, but it's interesting. Okay. But then after a conversation, we usually end up in, it can be used for this. That's fantastic. And maybe that's not the job of the researcher always.
Awesome. And before we move into the next topics here, it would be fun to hear also your story into AI Sweden, and we've both been included in that from Peltarion's side, and you're now focused even more in AI Sweden. And can you just tell the story a bit there, how that came to happen?
Oh wow! Well, early on, it was on the back of our meetings with the politicians. We came into contact with Mikael Ljungblom, who worked for one of our ministers, the Minister of housing and digitization, which
exactly.
is
that weird combination. That's
fun portfolio. And then Mats Nordlund, who's with Senseact now. And they started talking about building a national AI center, and we worked with them a lot, and then Peltorian was a founding partner of AI Sweden and involved in a lot of projects. And then this summer I took a leave of absence from Peltorian and joined AI Sweden.
Oh, so now you're there full time?
Yeah.
As a leave of yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your role in AI Sweden?
I work in one area that's called Major Impact Initiatives, a very pretentious sounding
Major
name.
Impact Initiative. What's the acronym? MIA.
MIA.
missing in action.
Missing
MIA.
action.
Yeah.
Initiative.
No, but it's projects that have very broad impact over a lot of different various players.
Could you give an example?
Yeah, I work mostly now on Swedish healthcare, trying to. We have a lot of projects, but the umbrella is a major impact initiative where we focus on trying to shift Swedish healthcare towards digitally data-driven healthcare that can customize healthcare and go from symptom treatment to healthcare proper.
And what's an ingredient in a major impact area? What is it? A plan? Is it an investment? It's people. What's the ingredients we're talking about?
The main ingredient, I would say, is the collaboration between different parties who come with different knowledge and understanding. And it's also an initiative that has made different healthcare regions and municipalities in Sweden start to work together and find.
So it's coordinating and project planning and getting like collaboration needs quite a lot of orchestration.
Yeah, and facilitating investment as well.
Perhaps we need to explain what AI Sweden is. I guess there are some people that don't know exactly what they do, and it's not super easy sometimes to understand all the different initiatives that we have in Sweden for trying to work with AI. How would you describe what the mission or vision with AI Sweden is?
The main mission of AI Sweden is to accelerate applied AI in Sweden.
Right.
As opposed to WASP, for instance, who's focusing a lot of advancing super advanced AI research and other programs.
So in short, you could say trying to accelerate operationalizing AI?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's obviously why Peltorian is such an important partner, and many others.
And what do they do to make that happen? I mean, they have received a lot of funding now. I think it's many hundred millions of crowns, right? And it's been, I think, one of the best initiatives that we've seen for a real long time in really trying to help the Swedish economy and society to move forward. But why do you think it has worked that well for AI Sweden? Do you have any idea of what the success story or the ingredients for making that happen is really?
I think the main success, there are several different value propositions, from education to being able to share data, to access to processing power and collaboration projects, focusing on joint problems. And I would say the main ingredient is the collaboration bit, because very few companies in orgs have the muscles or financials to take on an investment by themselves.
I certainly agree, and I think the fragmentation that we are seeing in Sweden and in Europe even more, I would say, is really detrimental and hurting, what we otherwise potentially could do. So I think these kind of efforts is crucial to actually do collaborate more, and perhaps not to have too pretentious goals like we will build the best courses. No, perhaps we can coordinate and help, finding, who can actually do this the best way, and then be like a stamp of approvals, certification.
Svanenmärkt. AI,
And also I think that's a very important thing. We don't need to be best. It's not super sympathetic to be best, is it? Because if you're best, other people are worse. Shouldn't you try to strive to be as good as everyone else and help everyone reach the same level?
Yeah.
And trying to invent the wheel yourself is not probably very few times the best idea. It's better to use. Yeah.
Cool. And what would you say the main focus of AI Sweden today is? There are a number of big like data factory, etc. But if you were to like give an overview for people to see, what are they working with today? How would you describe that?
There are a number of different collaboration projects, AI-driven mobility, identifying where AI can help mobility of logistics and people in Sweden the best, changing healthcare, as I spoke about.
All the nodes, perhaps? Or?
Yeah, I'm working spread out across Sweden to facilitate collaboration.
And how many nodes are there now? 6 nodes?
I think there's 6 or 7 nodes.
Yeah. So it's one.
And what's a node?
Node is a local office.
A local office?
Yeah, so we have a local physical office.
And is it a difference what is focused on in the different local offices, or what they do compared to the central part?
Slightly different depending on, I think it just skews a little bit towards what industry is present in that part of Sweden,
So node can also have a closeness to what type of industry is there, so we have collaborations in automotive in some parts of Sweden.
Yeah, in Volvo and Gothenburg, for instance, it's kind of natural, because they're sitting close.
And who is part of AI Sweden?
Oh, a lot. We have over 100 partners right now, both companies and public organizations.
So it's a mix of what? Corporations, so to speak?
Yeah.
And then, expert consultancies, or as well as sort of the big enterprises. So who's the corporation?
Big enterprises, startups, consultancy firms, public sectors, hospitals, academia, most of the universities, cities, research labs from big enterprises.
And this sounds great. So what's the entry ticket to be part of the family?
Yeah, it varies. Same model as similar initiatives like Art Park in India. If you are a big enterprise like Ericsson, you pay an annual fee.
It's like subscription.
Yeah, like subscription.
You're sponsoring.
Yeah, and it's a mix usually of pure money and hours that you spend into projects. Yeah, and if you're a startup, it's usually all in kind, only hours, because we have to take into consideration that they don't have the same financials.
So you can be part of the AI Sweden not only financially, but you can actually invest your time.
Yes, exactly.
For a startup.
Yeah, and usually that comes when you also apply when you receive a grant. You usually also get money, but you have to put in some yourself.
Yes, exactly.
And I think some companies don't understand the purpose or the added value or what you actually gain by joining. But as Paltorn has been part of that for a long time, to actually have someone and working together with, for example, AI Sweden to do applications to Vinnova or EU applications or finding other partners, having that stamp of approval in some sense, and actually getting the information saying you should probably talk to these people, or you should probably apply for that, or you should do this and that, and then that coming from AI Sweden, it brings up so much more authority, so to speak, when doing that. So I hope people understand, that this is a big added value.
It is a big added value, and it's all. I would say also there's another important dimension. It's very hard if you're in an organization, be it private or public, to pick up the phone and call another company and ask for help or advice. It's very challenging for your pride and ego. So we also offer a neutral collaboration space where things are kind of allowed.
I mean, for so many companies that they don't have that network, and they don't know who to speak to and who not to speak to potentially. So yeah, I wish more people understood the greatness of AI Sweden. It's certainly doing a lot to help in Sweden, I think. And
we've also come a long way. I mean, it's only been 2 years.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing great things right now.
And may I ask you, how big is the organization?
Oh wow, I think I have no idea right now. I would guess between 30 and 40 people.
But that's a central part, right?
Yeah, the central
part, and it's ultimately funded by?
50-50 by the state via Vinnova and our partners.
And then the partner, like subscriptions, stuff like this.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know a number of things you have a passion for, which is, for one, AI in education, for example. And I think you are the single person that actually brought elements of AI to Sweden, right? Or you're too humble to say that?
No, okay. If I put my humbleness aside, I would just have to say yes to that. Yeah.
Can you just talk a bit more about, how did that happen? And for people, perhaps explain
what is
elements of AI.
What is elements as well?
Elements of AI is a free online course in basic online understanding of AI that came out of Finland, out of the University of Helsinki, and a big consultancy firm called Reactor. And I don't remember what year, I think it was 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, something like this.
Yeah, the Swedish government gave 20 or 25 million to our big universities to increase awareness and create education packages for engineers in Sweden, basically, or for professionals. And I knew about this course in Finland, so I called Ville at Reactor, who I had been in contact with, and asked him, could we copy it to Sweden? And he said, yeah, sure. And then I spoke to Mats Nordlund, who was one of the founders of AI Sweden, and he said, yeah, that's a great idea. He had called this person at Chalmers, and I called someone at KTH, and they were a little bit lukewarm about the idea.
Was it the other initiative that you spoke of, and you didn't
we
say
will
the
do
name,
it better ourselves.
A little bit maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe that connects to wanting to do it yourself and losing. Okay, what are we going to do then?
Yeah, exactly.
But then Fredrik Heinz from Linköping University, he jumped on board straight away and kind of snatched the ball under their you snooze, you lose.
Perfect.
And then we incorporated into AI Sweden and launched it. And now I think 40,000 people in Sweden have taken the courses and been examinated. And there's over 10 countries in the EU translated into different countries. So I think it's a very good.
So it has started to grow as one of these, I wouldn't say de facto standards, but I would say it's one of the most spread now starting points to learn AI.
Yeah, it is a really good starting point. Yeah.
And it's very well done, so I took it myself. I think it was genius.
Yeah, and that's all that credit goes to Reactor in Finland. But and I think that goes back to what you said, curating what already exists. If that's good, use it again.
Yeah.
Repurposing.
Yeah.
But that's more like AI education, not really AI for education, right?
No.
So how can you use AI for education then?
I think it also goes back to that, we had so many advanced AI applications, and then we stumbled upon, a very interesting AI company right here in Stockholm, in Sana Labs, who are working with using AI for education. I mean, they're focusing their business model on adult education, but the principle is the same.
When you said adult education, I was thinking something else, but I know what you mean.
Professional education for nurses, and they've trained a lot of nurses during COVID to how to handle the pandemic. Yeah. So basically, using AI to personalize your education journey, which all research shows.
So lifelong learning in some sense, not just education in universities, so to speak.
No, and like the opposite of just educating everyone the same way, since our brains work differently and mature at different paces.
I mean, it's so obvious that is something that needs to happen. Just think Spotify. Does everyone want to listen to exact the same playlist all the time? Yeah. No, you want a personalized playlist. Why shouldn't you have a personalized, educational list, so to speak?
And we know kids, especially kids when they're around 10, it can differ several years how mature they are to understanding math. Yeah. And still they're supposed to learn trigonometry at the exact same date. Yeah. And if they fail at that point, they probably lost interest for math all their lives.
Right. Such an obvious thing when you hear about it, but strange that we haven't gotten further. But at least there are some good examples in startups in Sweden, etc.
But isn't this another topic then? Like we talk about this about data literacy and AI literacy and all that, and it's really about education, adult learning on a massive scale, right? Because we have super data AI scientists who needs to actually learn how to talk the domain lingo. How do I use this cool tech in relation to healthcare? Well, I really need to learn this part. And then vice versa, we all need to lift our game fundamentally in order to take part in these new teams. So it's a massive learning.
It is
challenge.
massive learning, and it also has massive implications in how it fundamentally challenges our system, how we work. I mean, we created our education system and our healthcare system over 100 years ago, based on the limitations of resources. How many people can we treat with one person? And now we have a different system, and we've also understood that symptoms are connected. If you have an illness here, it's probably connected to your gut flora or whatever. But we still educate doctors to be specialized, and if you have a symptom, you have to.
So we're moving into the next topic, guys. I think, and we spoke about AI and education for some time, and the obvious need for one to educate people what AI is, but secondly, to simply use AI for education as well, right? To make it more personalized and more efficient, and really, bring up the strengths and weaknesses of each person in some way. Right?
But also one thing in education, the other side is we have hundreds of thousands of teachers who spend 50% of their time on administration.
Right.
AI can automate that.
AI for education is also to free up quality time.
Yeah, so teachers can spend times with children, which is why they became teachers in the first place.
Which is such a no-brainer.
Yeah.
This is, I think, a big misunderstanding many people have. They think AI is this kind of really advanced type of technology. And we've been so used to, the more advanced some technology is, the more you have to scroll down some menu somewhere, fill out some form, which is really hard to understand. But I would argue that AI really removes that instead and makes all the communication and interfaces much more natural, so it's actually less of administration. And I really wish people understood that, AI is not something that makes administration harder. It really is the opposite.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's where hopefully now we're going to start in Gothenburg because there we have very, very excited principals and school leaders there who are interested in AI. So hopefully we can get a pilot going and find some good use case. And when we find that, then hopefully people will understand, okay, this is what it can do.
And you used to leave that, for the whole learning curve. And if we want to have augmented intelligence, or if we want to do this, I guess a huge topic will be also how we get this to become seamless in the way we normally interact. That's so the UX part of this becomes that's the whole niche in itself. Augment, UX for AI into UX in a seamless way.
Yeah,
must be super big topic. I mean, so you have something super cool, but it's actually too convoluted to use it. Yeah, but this doesn't need to be that way.
No. Will move in the other way, I think.
That's probably a field that probably is going to expand.
Yeah, I mean, like
UX designer.
I had this conversation with someone who sort someone who sort of was seeking a mentor, and she was into, I want to go into UX, and I say, you have a kick-ass field for yourself now if you start to learn this. UX augmented with AI.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
And just to close the topic as well about AI and education, if we were to look forward like 5 years, what do you think? This is a hard question, of course, but what do you think utopian kind of view of education will look like would be?
My hope is that we've done a school reform where kids get customized education and they get to focus on what they are best at that time. Yeah. So.
And what they need at that time.
Yeah, what they need at that time. So we have 100% of kids finishing school with full grades.
But it's a school reform needed in order to basically says one size does not fit all.
Yes.
It's a beautiful future. I certainly hope that will happen. And just to move into healthcare, you already touched it so many times, and I know it's another passion area of yours, and you're working a lot with it right now. And I know my mom, for example, she works as a nurse as well, and when she was forced into the digitalization era and she had to write journal text, in a computer, that was such a horrible moment for her. Yeah. And I think it still is for many people, and how digitalization in that way actually made things worse in many ways. And even though it has a lot of positive sides, of course, but still from, just thinking about the worker itself, it can also have a lot of problems. That at least the digitalization, transformation caused, and I guess every transformation is painful in some way. But okay, so what is your thinking about, healthcare? How can AI be of help for healthcare?
I mean, currently our healthcare system, which is called sick care, if you translate it straight from Swedish, is built around treating symptoms. So you have to wait until an infection occurs in your body, and then you have to go into a physical location and say, I want to help with this. And with AI, one thing I want is for that to use my data from my Pulse Watch or my Apple Watch at all times, and I want to be able to share that so my healthcare provider can contact me when they see deviations and help me stay healthy. Or if I want to be able to share that with ICA, so they can provide me with the right healthy food so I can stay healthier.
So it's a shift in focus from prevention instead of rehabilitation, or whatever we should call it.
Which is natural in industry. Course. You do preventive healthcare, or even if you with your car, you go
with
to
the car.
You go to the standard service.
And we had the same conversation has been in the car industry. Yeah. You know, we are the safest car to crash with. Yeah, that was in the 70s and 80s, and wear a seatbelt, right? And now it's the car that doesn't crash.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, isn't that kind of sad? It seems almost that we have more proactive care for cars than we have proactive cars for humans.
Exactly.
Right? We're more reactive in that sense for humans, that we wait until something happens and then seek help for it.
Yeah, so we also exercise our dogs more than we exercise our children.
But when in automotive did the real shift happen to do crash prevention? I think that is actually. That is not so long ago, if you think about it, because even the airbag, that is not preventing crashes. It's actually the latest 10 years with all the sensors. So it's quite tech related even. Or am I wrong?
No, but that was also probably regulations and policies coming in and demanding certain safety standards.
Yes,
but. Probably, and now I'm guessing, probably combined with decreasing profits from sales of cars, and the car companies saw that they could make more money from servicing. And again, back to the incentives of the healthcare system.
So that this was the analogy, simply to find another angle into what could AI do, or how can we be more proactive or preventive.
And that side of it requires system shifts, but one side that doesn't is just all the administration. Yep. I think nurses spend 50% on their time, doctors about 60% of their time on administration. Everyone hates it.
It's that much, right?
Yeah. And just imagine once we reach that point where a patient-doctor or patient-nurse conversation can be real-time transcribed, we can do a recommended diagnose and a real-time literature study of the latest research that pop up to the doctor, and they say, oh, this is the latest research on this topic.
And how far away is rocket science? If I look at all the ingredients, this can be done, right? What's the problem?
Where are bottlenecks here?
What are the real bottlenecks?
Because if you of course, if you go research, of course, it's been a lot of progress. But it's just the last 2-3 years that we've really seen the progress that we need to be able to do something like this. But then to move that into healthcare.
Into production, yeah.
Into production, and in healthcare especially, given the regulation. And rather, I've been actually working with a number of hospitals and regions in Sweden, and they have a kind of strange, but different perhaps hierarchy. And if you have parents that are medical doctors, so you probably know this better than me. But if you can't come to a medical doctor that's really high up and say, no, you should do it this way, they will simply say, "What are you?
Who are you?
Yeah,
I'm a surgeon."
Exactly,
we knew that.
Yeah, so it's really hard to make a change happen, right?
Yeah,
and that I think it's probably more of a challenge in terms of infrastructure and system than the actual modeling, even though that's a shift as well.
Because we had Stefan Vlachos here last time. So
from Karolinska
University Hospital. And I'm politically incorrect, whatever. I think there is this completely wrong focus in the conversation. I mean, like they're talking about how should we build the infrastructure or the perfect journal system instead of starting to break down the use cases and start doing it operational and putting things in production. So it's a little bit like when I was in Vattenfall, and we started to going on the big data journey, and we had some very clear examples. I have anecdotes for what Telia was doing versus what Telenor was doing. And I'm not naming names, but one company spent 1 billion to build a big data platform, with no value, with no use cases, but we have the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And someone else did the evolution approach on this. So for me, when I hear people talking in this space, it's like, I don't know, you are going at this in the wrong way. I mean, like, we tried that in the enterprise world in the 90s, in the 2000s. It clearly doesn't work.
No.
So you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so it's something, I mean, like, to operationalize AI, you can't do everything at once. You need to drip feed it. We all know it.
Yeah, and I think you're completely right. You need to start with the user problem.
Yes.
In this instance, our citizen.
Yes.
What is it we're trying to help them with, and what's the economic structure around that? If you look a little bit further, then currently the healthcare system is seen as a cost.
Yeah.
But what is the economic impact of healthy versus sick citizens over 10 years of time? Then you're seeing, okay, what could we do as a difference?
So an investment that pays back multifold, right?
Yeah.
But I think there is a fundamental shift how things are done now and how you drive transformation.
Yeah.
And I work at Scania right now, and this is one of my true passions, and why I ended up in Scania is because I'm with a boss that we said we need to build an innovation muscle. So, digital transformation today with data and AI is not like an as-is analysis, to-be analysis, gap analysis. We do a project and it's fixed. It's not static, my friends. It's all moving.
Yeah.
So you need to have a machine and innovation. Process becomes product, we say. Innovation life cycle, use case by use cases, and just having a muscle that grows and expand. The data DNA, so you're growing your platform as you build it. And here we come into the healthcare discussion. It's like, we can talk for 10 years about getting the perfect journal systems for all Sweden. Forget it.
Yeah.
You're not going to, that way is never going to fly. And it should be enough people, even from industry, who is sort of now understanding DevOps, all this kind of stuff, that can sort of say, it doesn't really fit with software development, what you're trying to do right now.
No.
Am I speaking? I don't know.
No,
I think it's like...
I completely agree. You have to focus on the why, not
the why,
what,
and then the use cases, and then building machinery. How you can just do how fast can you do each use case? How fast can you put things in production?
You see his strength here in being able to concise what you just said in one word.
Yeah,
we need to focus on why.
I need to focus on why.
That's one of the excellent skills that Kye has at some points.
And I think there's two organizations that I think could make a change here and probably have the responsibility to do that, and that's those are the unions for the nurses and doctors. Because their members currently spend millions of hours on administration. They should demand from Stefan Löfven and ask for at what date will our members spend 100% of their time what they're actually paid for.
That's a good one.
Okay, so we can use AI to help employees in healthcare in a different way. Of course, minimizing administration is a big and important area as well. I guess we can also potentially help nurses and other people do more advanced things if we can combine humans with AI, right? Or would you say that's also an important part?
Yes, definitely. And I would say probably, even now, even though nurses are educated to nurse people, they're doing a lot of the clinical and medical stuff.
Right.
Every doctor will attest to that. Yeah. They can do even more.
Yeah, I think so too. And then we also have the patients potentially.
Yeah.
And there are these things like precision medicine and being proactive instead of reactive, in treating injuries, and hopefully we can prevent, instead of curating symptoms that you otherwise see. What do you think about that? What if you were to compare, like, what can AI do for people or patients versus for employees? Where do you see the biggest impact potentially?
I think the biggest impact is the ability to give a more holistic analysis of the patient's health status beyond that individual doctor or nurse that's assessing.
But isn't it exactly the same as education and even music and Spotify? You need to personalize the healthcare. Isn't that?
And the same thing with medicine as well. Currently, we're developing medicine based on a cohort of people, based on that data that we, with our cognitive limitations, are able to analyze.
I remember my mother always saying, especially she was working in more palliative kind of, in the end of the life kind of treatment, and it's so easy for doctors to just overprescribe medication, and they have this like huge bucket of medicine, and the interaction effect that they have is severe often, and people can by simply removing medicine make them feel better, and this is obviously a problem of understanding data in some way.
The holistic view.
Yeah, the holistic view. For me, it sounds like...
I remember a conversation I had I was in an Indian conference, and obviously they use much more holistic medicine and also holistic healership, where they put their fingers on the pulse and they tell you what's wrong in your body, which is kind of hocus pocus to us here in Sweden. But then over just the last few years, we've seen AI and deep learning do fantastic things with heart rate variability. Being able to tell the difference in frequency in the heartbeats, and to be able to assess what's wrong with your body.
I had a friend of mine who did kinesiology. It's something about you just put your hand like 5 centimeters over your body, and then you do some kind of thing. For me, that sounded really humbug kind of thing. But this, what you said, you actually feel the pulse and try to understand what's happening with the heart. I think that makes more sense. And all the sensors we're starting to use, they potentially can detect things that a human never could even. So perhaps they can actually improve on that quite a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting times now when you, as a consumer, you can order a blood glucose meter and wear it for 14 days and see what you eat, how that affects you, and adjust your diet based on it.
But okay, so there's obviously so much that can be done with data and AI in healthcare. But if we sort of start maybe closing it down a little bit, like what is the number one thing we should focus on, or which one is is it admin we should just tackle admin, or what is it that we get most bang for our buck? Or
the lowest hanging fruit, I would say the administration and resource planning.
Yeah,
because that doesn't require huge system shifts.
No. I would agree.
Awesome. Should we? I'm eager to move into another topic, which is related but different, which is regulation as well. And I know you and me had a number of discussions about this. And one of the big challenges in healthcare is regulation, of course, and naturally so, because it's so sensitive data, especially if you use journal text from patients and whatnot. Still. If we go back just to the standard question, we have GDPR, of course, and I think we need no introduction to what that is, but it has its problems and its good sides as well. How would you describe the pros and cons of GDPR?
The pros are probably that it's protecting. We're starting the process of protecting citizen data.
Yep.
But one, it's not precise enough, which makes it very limiting for anyone who wants to innovate and start to do new things that can potentially save lives, innovate, boost the economy.
Yeah.
And I would argue that it's also created from an institutional standpoint, protecting the European Union rather than facilitating progress for the individual citizen.
I think this is something we've spoken a bit about before, and I think we need to just elaborate a bit more on that, because
dissect this a little bit. Yeah.
What we talked about a bit before is that I think it's exactly what you said. It was created to protect the European Union a bit, and especially against perhaps the tech giants in some sense, and keep the data in Europe or something. But in reality, what happened is the opposite in some sense, because the big tech giants, the Google, the Facebook, the Microsoft, the Apples of the world, they have the legal resources to really comply with the regulation without any problem at all.
Yeah.
and even fight it if necessary, if they want to. But the normal company in Europe or Sweden have no chance, so they're rather safe than sorry, so it actually hurts the European companies more than the other companies. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And even big Swedish corporations stay away from personal data because it's too scary.
Yeah.
I know that one of the largest food chains in Sweden, they stay away from that data because the fine for them, what is it, 2 to 4% of their
4%.
annual turnover would be enormous.
Yeah.
And so they stay away from providing health tips or...
But when you said that it was made or came up from an institutional point of view, could we elaborate a little bit like this? Because it's always been, if you read it casually, it's protecting the citizen.
Yeah.
But if you read it on a macro level, it's actually protecting, it's a way to taxate. I don't know. I mean, like how big is it? A different level here when you say it's protecting the European institution more than the citizen? What do you mean with that?
I mean, obviously it's subjective. Mm-hmm. That's my interpretation from the communication standpoint.
After work, we are politically correct.
No, but also the way the EU communicates,
yes,
it is from an EU standpoint. They don't exemplify with how a citizen is affected by this.
No.
Currently, we don't own our medical data in Sweden. We never did. So
exactly.
What's to protect? I mean, what's the difference? I still can't use that data and share it with a healthcare provider in another country. I don't have that control. So and we still have all these open services where you can search for anyone in Sweden as long as they have a publishing license.
Yeah, so it's very. If you start doing these examples like you do now, you're picking it apart. This.
No, I think it probably
right.
stands if they would have also provided guidelines for what's okay and a framework for how to collaborate and work together with the EU or here in Sweden our data inspection authority, who has a mandate to facilitate the flow of free data but don't have enough budget to provide that service.
But you said something now when you talked about actually. Someone has highlighted the next generation of internet is the whole custodianship of your data. Who owns my data? Who owns the data? So the whole GDPR concept is also falling flat when you actually say we actually never own our data.
No.
So who are you protecting?
No,
maybe there's another part of the law which is about custodianship of data, and then you get to this whole conversation of what they're doing in Estonia or whatever. Like, it's my data.
Yeah, I believe strongly in that. I think the EU is struggling with how to cope with China and the US, how to kind of win or compete. And I think the key or the way forward would be to harmonize data structure and give or regulate ownership of data to each EU citizen and controllership. Because then you create a value in data.
Yes.
That our citizens can trade with.
Yes,
abroad.
I fully agree with this.
And also a mental awareness that your data is yours.
And maybe you care about it more, and then we can have different appetite for if I want to share it to get good service or if I want to have it private.
Yeah, I think it should be like the same way as you turn off and on roaming in your phone, you should be able to turn on and off access to your data.
But this is a core component of the regulation that we haven't. I mean, like GDPR sets this, but it kind of doesn't work if you don't have this part as well.
No, I agree fully.
I'm so eager to argue and play the devil's advocate.
Do it. I want to.
It sounds like you love the cookie law.
Cookie law.
The law from GDPR properly that claims in every website has to have a pop-up saying, do you accept to use cookies or not? And no one really, reads the law or the reasons behind this, and everyone is super annoyed about it, and it becomes this kind of crying wolf problem where the whole purpose behind it, which is good, diminishes. And it's destroyed. So even though I agree partly, it's super important to execute and implement it in the right way. And I think they failed so miserably in this case.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with that as well.
but I think what what we talked about now is a nuance. We had a conversation about GDPR and that we failed, and we've gone down that rabbit hole several times. But now we started to, and we entered into the custodianship of data conversation, which I think is another side of the coin here. We failed here, so we need to still fix that. But even if we do that better, isn't this custodian topic quite important as well? Who owns my data? Or is that completely different?
I have a mixed view of that, actually.
Yeah? I think it's important to understand. I'm not sure I know exactly what I think.
I haven't really thought this through to have an informed discussion about it. But I think people are, the feeling is, one view that I have a problem with at least, is that they say that Facebook have so much data about us, Google have so much data about us, Apple have so much data about us. We should extract the data from them, take over the ownership of that. No, I don't think so. I think, we can actually easily, from a company point of view, if you had similar kind of services, build up data ourselves. Then, of course, we need to be super transparent. We need to be able to raise the data, etc. But, they provide a service and they create the data, and we allow them to do that without really understanding what they do. That is a problem. I feel I'm tramping in a...
But this is hard. I mean, it's a different...
It's not super obvious, at least to me.
No, it is not.
I think you really have to think through, because if we do this again and say, let's now claim ownership of this, it could be the exact opposite effect, just as GDPR did, if we're not really careful about what we're saying
in the end, it will win or lose based on implementation.
Yeah,
I think you make a very valid point, and I think you added a dimension to my thinking. I agree with you. I don't think the state or the EU should own the platform where the data is. Yeah. Maybe they should just create the harmonization and the structure and say that you have a right to move or store your data. And I think that's what I'm opposed to right now, that I don't control my own health data.
Yeah. That's one example.
But I would, as a concrete example.
Yes.
But I don't care if I store that at Google or Facebook or the Swedish public authorities, as long as I can access it and use it.
And you can handle the effects of it. I think Evelina, she's a lawyer, and we had her on her show before, and I think she said a really good thing. Regulation should handle the effects of using data or technology. And of course, that is what we should do. We should not regulate the data itself. We should not regulate the technique itself. It should be the effects. Yeah. If you abuse data, that should be punished and severely fined. And if you abuse technology, that should be regulated and severely fined. But I think it's a bit dangerous to regulate data ownership. But so, I could be,
But still. Do you guys, are you aware of the Estonian model? Or sort of, could you elaborate a little bit? What's the Estonian model in this?
To my knowledge, I think it was Taavi Rõivas' government who set up the vision for their government, zero bureaucracy, and started digitizing authority data structure around citizens.
It's like citizenship data or your e-government or your identity.
Yeah, you have like an e-citizen page.
And you can basically become an e-citizen.
You can become an e-citizen.
And you can launch your company as an e-citizen.
And you also control which authorities can access your personal data. You can turn that off.
So you have an e-identity which is centrally facilitated. Yeah. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I think so. We're kind of half guessing right now.
I know I'm not. I have followed. I read a little bit, but I don't know the details enough. But I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I would like to have a page like that where I can store all my health stuff.
So in a nutshell, then, if you're willing to share your data in order to make your life more smooth, you put it all there. You got it up there, and all the different agencies can go and fetch your data there or your healthcare like this. So you are part of yourself contributing to the own smoothness of sharing your data. Yeah. But essentially it's up to you, right? How much it is. Interesting.
Cool. Just looking a bit in the future as well about regulation, and we know it's a number of upcoming new acts coming up in Europe, and one of them is trying to regulate differently based on the risk, or if it's high risk AI or low risk AI. Do you have any initial thoughts about this?
I haven't read up enough on it to have a very good opinion on it, but I've read a little bit, and I'm a little bit curious about the process of assessing the risk, since my interpretation is that we don't currently live in a regulation world where we plan 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead.
Yeah, true.
So we assess the immediate risk.
Yeah.
But does this go back a little bit to what we discussed with Evelina? Is this the risk?
Yeah, should be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one danger, and I don't think, even though I read part of it, and I certainly haven't read everything, and it's not very well versed in it, but a bad interpretation, at least, if you be a devil's advocate again, is that they would define risk by sector, saying healthcare is a sector, which is high risk. Therefore, any kind of AI application in that sector is high risk, including administration.
Administration, which is then crazy, right?
Which would be really strange. And I hope I'm wrong, and I think I am. But, if you were to really think about, once again, even the intention is good. Of course, if it's high risk and have potential bad effects, then it should be regulated harder. I think that core idea is good. But if you implement it poorly by simply saying this sector is blah, 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 then that will be horrible.
You will screw it up.
Especially for the healthcare sector that needs AI so much.
It would be a detriment if you're not doing it right for the health for the public sector. By the way, the whole public sector will have a problem.
Cool. I'm eager to move to the next topic, which is some of your famous topics or sort of quotes or statements. And you can add more yourself, but let me start with something, and perhaps you can add some other quotes if you can think of it. But I think one quote that you said was, "We will never understand AI if we only focus on AI." Did you come up with that, or did you find it somewhere else? Or?
No, I think I wrote it as a headline at some point, and I've used it in keynote speeches as well.
So what do you mean with that?
What I mean, I think it came on the back of having seen and participating in panels and keynotes where people discuss the details of how a AI model is built to a non-technical audience or any audience who haven't worked with AI, because then it's you can count the seconds until people zone out.
So it's about you should have a more holistic view of the application of using AI, not just AI itself.
Yeah, I think imagine if you were to explain spreadsheets or Excel by explaining the code, no one would still understand Excel. You have to explain what you can do with it and how it functions in simpler terms.
Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious when you see
it's
it.
It's a good quote.
Yeah.
It's a good quote.
It sounds, first bad, if you only focus on it. But of course, when you hear it explained, it makes so much sense. So, awesome quote. Let's take another one. This is kind of obvious. I'm not sure it's so interesting. But you said something about every technology shift or disruption has two parts, which is the invention or development part and the operational part. Yeah. What do you mean with that?
I mean, it ties back to what we said, something we said at the beginning, that we've seen this before. Yeah. When the internet bubble came around, everyone said this is just a fluke or a hype. We're not going to have to change. And then everything shifted. No one's going to say today we don't need to use the internet. And we're the first time in history where the same people in leadership was around back then, but still have the same mentality towards AI. And I think the difference is because tech development always accelerates. It's happening faster and faster.
It's exponential growth.
Yeah. So the first 10 years, internet happened slow, and then it's just happening fast. Uber, Tesla, all these companies just competing and changing the landscape. Yeah. And if this is happening at an exponential pace, when we hit that
inflection point.
Inflection point.
The AI inflection point.
Yeah, where it's widely available. What happens to the market if you still only have a small research lab in the basement and haven't touched your data? Because then you won't have time to act. Yeah.
I think this is something that I try to explain over and over, how we are shifting from one S curve to another S curve, from the you're on the macro life cycle of the industrial revolution, and now we are shifting to a new macro life cycle of data and AI first. Yeah. And when that sort of takes off, when that sort of when the majority is already on this steep inclination and you have not even started, there's no way of catching up.
No.
There's no way.
And my argument also, because the counter argument is often, we don't see any obvious AI use cases. Okay, maybe not right now, but you'll still see value by structuring your data, starting to take data-driven basic analytics decisions. So do it anyway, because the other stuff will come.
I've used exactly this argument to say that there are some no regrets, other way of putting it, activities you can do now. Go for AI, go for operational AI, but also go for the no regrets topics that we know is good for having good AI. And it will help you now, and it will set you up for the future.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
Okay, let me. I agree as well, but I think it's fun to play the devil's advocate at some points. And
do it.
And then we have the invention phase, and you also have the operational phase, where it actually start to really make sense and value for a lot of companies. But we also have the effect of the innovator's dilemma in some way, that the company that are the first may not really see the benefit of it, and it can be dangerous to sometimes be the innovator, so to speak. So would that mean, and I'm talking about against myself now in my beliefs, which is really weird for me, but still, does that mean that companies should not have R&D's development because they shouldn't be caught in the innovator dilemma problem? Or should they wait for other companies to do the innovation and then just tag along? Or what is the best way to really do this?
I think it's both. I think you should identify which opportunities or possibilities are too large to tackle and try to collaborate or learn from others or buy that intellectual property or tech from others, and then identify, okay, which can be our competitive advantages or what data should we hold on to. Yeah. Currently, I think it's an either-or situation where people, they don't want to share anything, even though they don't know what, or they don't want to learn from anyone else because they don't know how to work with it.
I mean, well said. I think the mix is the best, and even though there is an innovator dilemma, it's not always the case. And very often, if you find that really core thing and really become the leading innovator, that can be a hugely valuable position to be in. Right? So you need to always innovate, but I think it's so important to just keep track of what others are doing as well and catch on with that.
Yeah.
If you do both, the mix, as you say, trying to keep up with what the others are doing and then not you just skip over the innovation part because you recognize they did something good. At the same time, also innovating to actually find those parts, you should be home safe or you should be in good position, right?
But here I look at this from a slightly different angle. Yeah. I think both of your arguments are, this idea is valid. But when my understanding for data and AI, and I like to talk about data and AI ready. This is a journey. So for me, it's a journey. The way I experience it, both Vattenfall and now Scania, is like, oh my God, you don't know anything until you have started and learn by doing is the key story. So for me, it's not about I'm doing cutting edge innovation or not. It's about, you know what, you don't have a clue what this is all about until you dip your feet and then stay, And when I say that, I'm actually more on the operational side than the cutting edge side. So it's a little bit like, let's get some really good BI self-service going, of very stupid stuff for automating a process. Because when you start we need to optimize or automate as key metrics, and you start pursuing that, you actually learn about this is a new operating model, this is a new organizational construct, this is a new technology stack, and it's a new set of dealing and treating data. And there is no way in hell, it has nothing to do with innovation. It's a hard slug. And this is this sort of, and in order to accelerate even, and to my opinion, that's data and AI ready. It's not so glamorous. Some of it is maybe glamorous, but I'm doing it. You got to do it to learn it, to understand it. Yeah. That's my angle on this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I agree. And I mean, the optimal scenario would be that you have cutting edge R&D here and some stuff that's super easy but affects how you run your organization. So you can integrate that here. But if you have to prioritize, I would probably argue towards the low-hanging fruit that affects how you run your company, because then you can expand into the other. It's harder to go the other way around.
Yeah, and it's the whole idea. Can an enterprise disrupt himself?
Yeah.
You know, are you able to? And what we have had the strategy both in Vattenfall and now in Scania has been also, okay, how can we have use cases that impacts people's understanding for data, literally build data literacy. So sometimes it's not fancy at all, but it actually gets you understanding what is data and why is this data like this. I just simply, this old boring giving transparency to data has nothing to do with AI, but it's actually part of the journey that we kind of need to treat our data in a different way. So I don't know. I mean, innovation, I think, is also important. But what I like with innovation, the way Peltorin and you always talk about it, is like you don't overhype it to something else. Like, be concrete on a very concrete problem. Get the camera, fix the lawnmowers. Do something super concrete. Is that fancy? I don't know. It's super fancy from AI point of view, but as a concrete problem, it's very clear. Yeah. So what is innovation that is fantastic to me for a normal company?
I think it's another topic also that you touch into that perhaps we should take at some point, which is how research in AI is being done today, especially in academia, versus how research in industry, which actually is in AI bigger than in academia, I would argue. But I think it's a different topic, so perhaps later we can move into that.
Which topic are we on now? We're circling now.
Okay, so we spoke about...
see what happened, right?
We are still on Kye's famous quotes.
Yes. So we just spoke about innovation versus operation and the two phases, and how we need both, I guess, is a summary of it, right? Yeah. And I think one of the favorite quotes of all, really, that you made, that at least my favorite, is how ethical is it not to use AI?
Yes, I know.
Yes.
Right? And can you just, elaborate a bit more, what do you mean with that?
Well, it came from, I think it was probably 2 years ago now, when every politician in the world started talking, and probably business leaders started talking about, we need to use AI ethically, which to many of us, we just heard, okay, you don't understand AI at all, so if you discuss ethics, you don't have to act. It was like a snuttefilt, a comforter to not act, because then you could just stop and discuss ethics for a while. But the question that was never asked was, what can we use AI for? Like,
what's the opportunity cost of not using
what's the opportunity cost? And going back to the risk assessment of healthcare, okay, if that's deemed as a high-risk area, healthcare, and we don't use AI, people are dying. Is that ethical?
Yeah. So I guess in some case you can compare the two scenarios and say, here's a country that's used AI a lot in healthcare, here's one does not, and you can see when they started to use AI, they had reduction in deaths or in improvement in life expectancies or whatnot, right?
Yes, and even here in Sweden, we have regions who've come very far with applying AI broadly in Region Halland, who've seen great health benefits and saved a lot of resources already.
Yeah.
So I think it's super important. Yeah. But and also one more thing there. We're currently in the process of setting up an AI ethical committee, as a national one, and we've done a lot of interviews with experts and still a little bit uncertain if there is any purely AI ethical use case that doesn't fall into normal ethical
topics. So you mean normal ethical rules
and regulations? Yeah, it's just on a bigger scale or a different timeline.
I find that very interesting. So because we need to have an AI strategy, we need to have a data strategy. Well, we have business strategy, and then we have AI implications of that strategy. Isn't ethics the same?
Yes.
What is AI ethics compared to data ethics or digital ethics or IT ethics?
I think it's a data problem in terms that it adds more honesty. Yeah. You have to be truthful about, we've been discriminating up until now.
Because we take the classical cases.
Listen to what he said. I think this is more profound than you think.
Because currently when we do a credit check when you apply for a loan, it's okay to discriminate because it's people. Once we start doing it with AI,
it's not okay.
It's not okay anymore. Yeah. And then we have to be honest about it.
But how good is, that really puts a light on what the real problem is. I mean, like, you can flip the whole conversation. Back to your quote. How ethical is it to not use AI?
Yeah, exactly. With AI, we could probably start to mitigate the problem, hopefully.
But it's also, there is an unfair or different comparison if you take machines versus human. And, I guess, self-driving cars is the easiest one to just think of in your head. And, let's say a car kills another person and it's a human driving or it's a machine driving. And then the question is, what is the requirements on a human and what is the requirements on the machine to be able to allow it on the street? And we allow people that should never sit in front of a steering wheel to be on the street today, even if they're drunk or they're tired or they don't even know the street signs or whatnot. But for a machine to drive on the street, we put super high requirements. I think it's okay. They should be like 10 times more, stricter requirements on a machine. But I think people need to recognize that.
And have that discussion as well. I mean, right. We've seen those differences when we discussed with our acquaintances from other countries where they have a more collective thinking, that they don't have the same philosophical problem because it's more natural to think that the collective good is prioritized over the individual good. But here in Sweden, we have very high value of our individual priorities. So it's a big problem for us.
Interesting. Which countries are a little bit different here, you would say?
I would say China.
China, yeah.
Which has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
I'm eager to jump into the China discussion.
And then we always, back to ethics, and we had Louise Kallenberg here.
Yeah.
And she has her background even as a priest. So ethics is very closely connected to values and culture. So what is ethics in one country and what is ethical?
Exactly.
And is it cultural or
I think it's important that we spend time on challenging or at least discussing the given truths that we all just accept. I mean, everyone who's read Sapiens know that most of the things that we accept as given truths, democracy, human rights, are still constructs by us humans.
Yes.
Are those the best things for humanity in the long run? I mean, you could argue that democracy and climate change are two things that don't really work well together, since we've still, I don't know which climate conference we're on right now.
So we need climate dictatorship for the good.
I wouldn't say that. Don't use that as a quote, unless it's a T-shirt.
Okay, but
climate dictatorship for better, for good. Yeah. I don't know.
What about AI dictatorship? Okay, but let's at least one more question about ethical, because you can speak forever about this. But okay, let's say that we want to now have a medical AI system. Let's go back to self-driving cars. I think why not? Okay, now we want to build in the best type of ethics we can think of in the car. And there are a number of ways to do that. Of course, we can have rule-based system manually programmed by humans, or we can have a more data-driven approach where you simply learn, hopefully not by killing millions of people and then learning, but hopefully a bit quicker. Do you have any thoughts? Should we have humans writing rules to define what is ethical or not, or can it be a purely data-driven approach to learn what is ethical or not?
I don't think, if we have access to all the data, I don't think we can combine data and the way we perceive democracy as today, because then we will prioritize more people who contribute more to society over people who do less, because then it'll be a purely economic system, right?
But that could be applied both for humanly coded rules as well as data-driven.
Yes, definitely.
I certainly don't have the answer for that.
No, I don't know. It's a too complicated question. I mean, we've seen it recently in the pandemic, where we, I think, for the first time prioritized short-term elderly prioritization over long-term children prioritization.
Exactly.
But is it because we bring the word ethics into this? Because if you ask Elon Musk, and you can watch the video when he's talking when the car is driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco, he's basically saying, you know what, don't even try to program this. This is data of billions of data, and we are now, and he's going quite into detail of, you know, how they have learned what is the lane, you know, what is the drivable lane, you know, it's a core metric, right? Where does the car fit?
Still,
and for me, this is data driven to the max.
But what he also said, though, which is obvious, is, you know, the one core rule for Teslas is never crash, and that is a hard coded rule.
Now
at least one.
It's like the robotics laws almost for
Asimov's laws.
Asimov's laws.
No, I agree with that. Obviously, data driven for autonomy, but if a situation occurs where there's an adult and a child, and it has to be prioritization, or dog or human.
But if you have enough data points.
True, but the problem is you don't want to collect like 1 million data points about killing 2 million dogs and 1 million people.
No, then we end up with some sort of combination.
Yeah,
we end up with some sort of combination.
Yeah, I think so.
Perhaps, yeah. As long as we don't speak about hybrid AI, because then I get annoyed. But okay.
This is
no,
new term.
Let's not go there. Okay, cool. Okay, so that was, you know.
Hybrid AI.
I didn't.
He opened up Pandora's box. Hybrid AI. What the hell is that?
I don't know what is that. That is good.
No. Okay, I don't. You know, it's just as you shouldn't talk about, you know, suicide. You shouldn't speak about how to make nuclear weapons, and you shouldn't speak about how to build bombs. Neither should you speak about hybrid AI.
Okay,
so let's close it with that.
So we'll leave it that as a cliffhanger, and everybody can Google it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we can close. I had one point, you know, potentially, but if you have some other quotes that you'd like to bring up that I may have missed, I was thinking about something that we have been speaking about a bit, and I know you have been speaking about a number of times, which is digitization versus digitalization. But it's, well, I think we mentioned it so many times already, so perhaps it's not super interesting.
I mean, I don't use any of those terms that much, but I know that they're both used, and sometimes people use them wrongly. I know the one basically means just shifting whatever you do physically
lift and shift,
to the digital world, and the other one means change for the digital world, or according to the digital world.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I have another topic that I'd like to talk about, because I actually spoke about that yesterday quite a lot, actually. It's actually an AI Sweden thing, the NLP webinar thing.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. But the use case library, and this is something that comes from the AI agenda work. You know, we have this big 1 year plus work trying to basically come up with a set of rules or some guidance for Swedish politicians in how to simply use AI in the best way. And one of the ideas of the crystallized 23 action points is to build up a use case factory. And it's similar to AI Sweden's data factory. It's exactly where the term came from. That is not sufficient perhaps to simply have a data factory, but actually have some kind of use case factory to make people learn, you know, how to use it. And you have worked a lot with this, so you built up a use case library as well.
So what is it?
Well, basically, the idea came around 2.5 years from discussions with you and others, that people don't understand AI unless we show them what AI can do. So we need a lot of examples in one place. So you, as a business owner, CEO, or a politician, or a citizen, can go in and say, okay, I'm at work in forestry. What can it do for me? And understand it in super simple terms. And once you've read a few cases, then you start
seeing the patterns.
Yeah, then you see the patterns and start to build that.
Great idea.
And we started building it last year together with also a Reactor, and I think currently Peltarion is working on materializing it, and we're trying to collaborate on creating this. And I think we have 140 different use cases. And a key important factor is also to package them with simple language, so we don't fall in the trap of using tech.
I still think you should be allowed to use tech, though, but
it could be an expand.
But now I get curious. So now we are sitting here with the challenge to crack how do I present use cases in a very pedagogical format? And this is a good tips and tricks for anyone to learn. So what is the tips and tricks? What are you doing? Can we look at it, or can we?
Yeah, it's Case Library.ai, right? Or what's
I don't know. Is it up right now?
Perhaps I shouldn't say it. Sorry.
I don't know. It might be.
But maybe you can elaborate on how do you what is a good use case?
I'm not sure if it's public yet, so perhaps we should.
We can just show it up. It's okay.
So I think it is Case Library.ai.
Yeah,
right?
I think we have one version there as well. It's a beta work in progress, trying to facilitate a lot of different
if
stuff.
you just write in the address field, above Case Library.ai, I think.
But what we started with was to try to describe it in the simplest possible way.
Perhaps
There's a weird tilde over the I in library.
Spelling this correctly?
The I there has a diphthong.
Ett konstigt i ser ut som.
Yeah, it's a weird I in library. Yeah, just rewrite it. Yeah.
no one is seeing what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
but
.ai.
It doesn't matter.
Nice.
No, we can show it.
Yeah, just accept cookies. Talking about the cookie.
Exactly. Cookie law.
Cookie.
Who doesn't love that?
Yeah. So I think if you scroll down here.
But just to give at least some people listening, can you give a single example of,
What constitutes a use case, or how is it presented?
Describe the problem in tweet format or former tweet format, 140 characters.
So 140 characters.
Yeah, very, very shortly. What's the problem? What's the opportunity? What could the solution be?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the data required to make this happen? And what technology? And then read more if you're interested and point somewhere where they actually...
But I think this is important, because what's the problem? What's the opportunity?
Yeah.
But you also give an understanding of, what are the data you would need, and what are the type of algorithms and technology you would need.
Yes.
So your problem, solution, and decomposure of the core ingredients.
Yes.
Lovely.
Here we have, this is maybe not the most sexy use case, but urgency detection for customer complaints. The challenge, angry customers is left unattended or not identified because people have different skills at this. The opportunity is to handle this well in as short as possible terms. And the role of AI here is probably obviously to help mitigate and identify these use cases and help the organization.
So here you have laid it out a little bit like is that it? It's like, or is it like, then you can...
Yeah, and then we've just classified it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here you have like an end use case, retail, text, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're missing hinders.
Yes. We want the main purpose, and I think this is important to stick through, is just to have people understand what's the possibility.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one key to AI readiness for organizations, is understanding what are the opportunities for our organization.
Yeah, I think this is one part of what this is good for. But I think also this demystifying of what is the underlying type of math. Or this is text classification. This is, this is this type of problem.
Yeah. And I think also for us who's worked in many different problems and industries, it's kind of natural to see, okay, I understand this. Oh, then it can be applied somewhere else.
Because now you understand the pattern of the problem.
Yeah.
If I have this frame, I have something and I know what the result should be.
Yes.
This is this type of problem, is this type of algorithm.
But if you've worked in fashion your entire life and you see, oh, here's an image recognition model for forestry. I don't understand that. I don't work in forestry.
Exactly.
You don't make the connection.
You don't make the connection that the underlying pattern problem is the same mathematical problem.
No.
So who writes these use cases? Is it customers that are coming, just basically leaving some kind of a tweet?
No, currently it's just a working group has put these few up. but we've had a larger group contribute to up until 140. But the idea is to...
Because it would be great if you have, because the challenge and the opportunity there is like the minus, is the 0 and the 10.
Yeah.
And in between is actually the hinder, right? So what is hindering you for getting the opportunity, right? So when you identify that, you know exactly where do you need to go.
Yeah.
And that is actually where the magic happens. It's not in the challenge, because the challenge can be a very fluffy one. But if you cannot define the hinder, then you are in trouble, because the challenge is like, hey, I have a challenge, I cannot use this, right? But do you want to use it? Yes, I want to. But do you know how to come to that? What is the specific pain that you have? And that is basically where you get it.
Yeah,
So
I agree. I think that's a
one.
great idea, and I think that should be added as soon as we have maybe 20 use cases.
Yeah,
like, fold down. Okay, I want to do this. What are the steps?
Yeah, but it's even better if you can do it. You don't have to have the hinders yourself, but if your readers can actually put the hinders, that is, or the things that are stopping them from reaching that opportunity, then actually you can collect the knowledge that you need in order to move forward. Because you can identify the challenge and the opportunity, but the hinder is going to come from the person who is actually sitting and working with that.
Yeah, true.
So,
Like I said, we're also taking this idea.
sorry.
We're also using the same idea for one of the big Vinnova project that is also AIA Sweden is working with, which is the Swedish language model for Swedish authorities project. And we're just trying to basically come up with a use case library for just to work inside that project.
Good. Yeah.
And also connected to some set of best practices or something.
Yeah, so here you have the technique, and out of this technique, we can apply this technique.
I would say it is focused on use cases for sure, but it's a bit more technical because it does include, what techniques are used, but it also adds contact information. So the idea is to keep it really short. I think the key point is really what you say to keep it concise, because if you publish a long lengthy report of 200 pages, no one will ever use that. But if you can find a really concise description of, this is what we used it for, the use case, this is the techniques we use, these are the challenges when it comes to legal data, code, deployment, and we try to list them, and then, if someone wants to read more, we have a set of links to read more, if there is a blog article somewhere or some demo app or something. But then there is a contact information. If you want to know more, contact these people.
Just so I understand, or also the listeners understand the difference. I think this is super useful.
Yeah.
But here you have it in the context of the Swedish BERT model.
Yeah, the Swedish language model project.
So you have a Swedish language model project. So we are now evolving AI techniques for the and here we are now exploring use case theme. Out of this, you're exploring themes that where you can utilize the Swedish language model.
Yeah, what we're seeing. I think the core idea of a use case library is so profound, and we can see even in a project where we are Batari and RISE, we're the tax authority with the employment agency, and the National Library, and a number of other big organizations. But even us working together internally in this project, we have a really hard time to get an overview. We have a really hard time to see, they in tax authority did this thing, but what did they really do? Can I find a link to read more about it? Who should I contact to know more about this? To simply do that internally allows us to collaborate a bit more. And imagine, if it's hard for us internally inside this project to have an overview, it will be impossible for someone externally. So then, to think, when this project is finished, how can we really disseminate or communicate this properly? I think this type of use case library metaphor or format is super useful.
I think the format is very, very powerful. Yep. And I think it's also very important to acknowledge that to concretize an example is something that's very, very scary for most people. That's why it's so seldom happens, and why in the beginning of projects we kind of skip that step. We stay one level above it. I think Katarina Gospic speaks about this, because when you go all the way down to explaining exactly what's going to happen, then you become accountable. If you stay one level above that, then you can you don't have to be accountable for it, and we can still explore, and you don't have to be responsible for anything.
You are hitting a raw nerve that I fully agree with here. And I've been in several projects where basically, and I've been accountable for this problem myself, you don't articulate the problem in such a sharp way so you can actually solve it exactly how it's supposed to be done. And I have several anecdotes on this actually, but I don't want to go in there. But this is profound as well.
Yes.
That when you know, and I give you an example. We have a use case called profitability. Give me a break. We can talk about profitability in relation to anything of our in a business process. So you need to be, what's the metric we are trying to fix? And ultimately, those operational metrics, it seems to be quite hard to dig out, as you highlight. But in reality, that's the real use case. That's the real business case. And that tells me something. You understand your problem. Now I can fix it. I don't think you can even really fix an AI problem or data problem if you're not that precise.
No. And I would go as far as saying, I mean, we're the masters. We're probably best in the world at setting goals that are stated as we're going to be the best at something. We're going to be the best in the world at life science or whatever. I would say that's not a goal. It's not even a strategy because you can always post-construct being best. It's not a measurable goal.
No.
Cool. We have only like 15 minutes left, but I'd like to move into more fun, philosophical kind of discussion as well, if we can go in that direction. And one of the core ideas we speak about a lot is the so-called AI divide, meaning basically we have a few set of tech giants in the world, the big, US and Chinese tech companies. That is, knowing they have the data, they know how to use the data, they have the infrastructure, they have the knowledge, they have the innovation, the research team, and they can basically dominate the world in some extent. If you look at the most valuable companies in 2019, it's Google, it's Facebook, it's Amazon, it's Apple, and it's Baidu, it's Alibaba and Tencent. And it seems like they know how to use data and AI to an extreme that is much bigger than I think people understand.
The gap is bigger than people realize.
And they have research that allows them to look 10 years ahead, from where they are today. And then if you look at a normal company, they're struggling to even get data collected because they're afraid about GDPR. They don't have the understanding how to use the latest techniques. And this kind of big divide between normal companies and the few tech giants, I would argue, is much bigger than people understand. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that fully. It's insane how big of a difference it is to be a company in Europe and in the US.
Yeah.
But is this a societal concern? I mean, like I even had that as part of the Data Innovation Summit keynote this year, that this is a societal concern, that if this growing divide, it's a new type of rich and poor, and it's going to drive a lot of bad stuff out of that situation. If you take that to the extreme, where that could lead us, is that over exaggerating? No, I'm really scared.
No, I agree, because what those companies do in China and the US spill over and affect all other sectors.
Yes.
Because people move around and become leaders in other sectors, or they share technology and move in other sectors. So healthcare and schooling are going to advance faster as well. As well will politics. Because obviously those big companies affect policies in the US and China as well, much, much faster than we do here. And then on top of that, they have in China a one long plan that they give money to, and in the US they have the world's biggest free market, so it's easy to scale there.
Yeah, but we have talked about this now. What is the real societal concern of this? Why is this a problem for society? Why is this a problem? I mean, are we just jealous, or why is it really a problem?
You have a better chance of survival if you get cancer today in the US and have money than you have in Sweden.
This is one core, inequality. It feeds inequality.
But I think it's important to point out, it is if you have money in US and if you have money in China as well, I would argue.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you take like the normal average company in US and compare it to an average company in Europe, I think, the European average company is not that far behind or even potentially ahead. It is like a big divide. That's the, the core issue, that there is a couple of few companies that are super successful. Yeah. And unfortunately, we have none of those in Europe. That is a big problem.
But also in the top 100, I think. Actually, in the top 100 in the US and the top 100 in Sweden, per capita, the investments are bigger.
Yeah.
into AI.
Yes.
But I want to try. I mean, like my understanding is that I think it's better for society, our economy, arbetslöshet, all this stuff, if we can manage the disruption, so to speak, from within our organizations today. So it's going to be a painful journey of job allocation or reallocation and all that kind of stuff. But when that happens from within an organization, rather from a force from somewhere else that comes in and completely disrupts an industry, I think that's going to have a much more more difficult impact on our economy. So we have a really painful journey to sort of catch up and disrupt ourselves. But the alternative is that someone else is disrupting. I mean, we have talked about what happens when Amazon comes to Sweden, right? So I think that's, for me, that we will have knock-on effects in jobs and all that will look very, very different if we do it. We are the drivers of our own change, versus we are forced into it and not being prepared at all.
Yeah, and I think that requires honesty and vulnerability.
Yes.
So a simple question then: how do we fix that?
I love it. 10 minutes.
Wow. I think above all, we need signal value and inspiration. We need to start to encourage and celebrate those who dare. But I would say definitely we need political leadership.
Yeah. And investment, as you said.
I like that T-shirt. Celebrate those who dare.
Yeah.
And by the way, we spell dare, data, AI, ready, dare. Celebrate those who dare. I love it.
Awesome. One more topic. I think we can. Yeah, we have time for that. Okay, so let's move to the singularity. And are you, for one, concerned? We have a number of famous people. We spent, we already spoke about Elon Musk, of course, and he had made statements like, AI could be the biggest threat to humankind, etc. Are you agreeing with that, or what's your thought about, the potential threat that AI can have when and if we reach a singularity?
I've dived in the Indian Ocean and see the corals, the dead corals, and I know we have currently 414 ppm in our atmosphere. I'm not worried about singularity. I'm worried about other things.
Well, such a good statement.
Because worry about the stuff that we will die for in the next 50 years.
And which we can use AI to mitigate.
Yeah. So AI can mitigate all these other problems. So if it freezes us to do what we really need to do, it's the wrong focus.
Then we can start worrying about singularity.
Yeah, I love it.
It's hard to even continue the discussion.
I don't know. It's like it's almost like an ending quote.
Yeah, you want to end with that. But okay, of course, and I certainly agree. And I think the whole Agenda 2030, goals that we have for sustainability is something that we dearly need to use AI to be able to have any chance of achieving in 10 years, of course. Yeah. But still, agreed what you said. But let's just, think 50 years ahead then, or 20 years ahead. Or Ray Kurzweil says, 2029, we will reach singularity.
Yeah, but I'll entertain the thought because I've got the question. Will we, when that point occurs, will we still be around? Or
will the point occur?
Well, if it...
Would you think so? Opinion, we have a joke. Put a number on it. When?
2500 maybe?
Whoa, that's even more than...
maybe 2200. But I'm also maybe very pragmatic about it, because if the question is, okay, what's the problem? Will they see us as a threat? Well, then it's up to us to earn the right to still be around.
If we try to take at least two different definitions of singularity, it could be one definition that is commonly used is that of control, saying they may not be more generally intelligent than us, but it will be a point where we can't pull the plug anymore, so to speak. They can create and propagate, so to speak, perhaps not in a biological sense, but still, they can grow and become independent of us, and there will be a point where we simply can't turn it off, so to speak. That is often what Elon Musk speaks about, and then the question is, when we lose control, will we do that, and what happens if we do that? if we use that term, do you think there will be a point where we simply can't pull the plug of a machine and they will just, be able to live without us, so to speak?
I have a hard time imagining that. I think cognition is not enough to drive survival. I think there's more factors involved. I don't think if we create true cognition, even super intelligence level.
You mean consciousness? Or
consciousness. Good, thanks.
Yeah.
Even at the super intelligence level, I don't see the driving factor for that to want to evolve or want to live. So I'm not sure.
I sometimes speak about, we have an illusion of control today, I think.
Yes.
I don't have control of you. You can't control me. You can try. Probably can, perhaps. I don't know. But there are so many things that we can't control. I can't control the weather. At some point, I think we can, but not today. And we live in a world where most of the things that we interact with, we have no control over whatsoever. But suddenly, there is this point where some machines suddenly become out of control, and we're super scared about that. That, for one, I would actually be kind of happy if there is something that is probably more intelligible and certainly more knowledgeable than me to help me.
And also given the inherent urges that we are born with that make us this close from genocides and other horrible acts, this machine, what's to say that that's more horrible than us?
Exactly. And I think everything that we've seen in the evolution of humans has been that we go towards more and more being civilized.
Yeah.
So increased knowledge and increased intelligence potentially leads to increased civilized society.
So, but what is the core? When even quite knowledgeable people are sort of raising concerns or highlight that this could be scary, why are they scared? And what is it a doomsday prophecy, or take Elon Musk that we respect?
I think that's a good question. So why is Elon Musk saying this? The person that's probably using AI more than
anyone.
And do you have any? I can give my, but we'd like to hear yours first.
Why would Elon Musk say this? Who knows AI better than us?
What do you think? He even says, we need to regulate AI more. Why? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Does he know something we don't know?
I mean, I think I don't know the end motivation to it, but I could guess that the steps towards a self-conscious superintelligence are really scary. So if we regulate the way...
This is actually one of my core points. Yeah. So just to make that
I didn't get that, so elaborate on this.
So I think narrow intelligence is much more dangerous than general intelligence. The thing that happens if someone builds a really intelligent, trading machine that can, completely dominate and disrupt the whole economical market, that will be, dangerous and cause a crash once again, that can really destroy the whole society that we have.
It's probably most dangerous before we lose control of it.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Lose control and, narrow intelligence that can do small things like, build a drone that can go and kill people at will. That's something we can do potentially today, but we have been able to keep that under wraps, so to speak, because of regulation and the ethical values we have. But that would be, of course, super dangerous. Or some AI that can build some kind of biological weapon, a coronavirus number 2, or something that could be super scary, of course. But I think that this is partly what Elon Musk is thinking about. We need to have, for one, he's speaking about, we need to have insight before we have oversight. So insight basically means we need to understand what is happening, and then when we understand, we need to be able to do the proper regulation. And the positive thing, because I don't want to end with this kind of doomsday kind of dystopian kind of thinking, but the positive thing is we've been able to do this a number of times in the past. So we've been able to do that for genomics, we've been able to do that for nuclear weapons, and I think we can easily do it for AI as well, but we need to do it now, and that is really the point that he's trying to make, in my view, because we could wait 10 years for biological weapons to not happen or chemical weapons not to happen. And we could wait 10 years before, we were able to clone Dolly or clone humans and whatnot. But for AI, 10 years ahead, it could be too late, potentially. It goes so much faster. So he compares it usually to this kind of seatbelt argument that, before you had regulation in cars to have seatbelts, thousands of people were killed because the automotive makers were fighting this regulation to the extreme. But it was still okay. It's just 100,000. But it could be, if we don't do this in time, worse for AI. But I think, obviously, since he's using it the most of everyone, he thinks we will be able to do it, but we just need to start thinking about it and have the insight before we do the oversight. Was that too long or too strange, or did it make sense?
No, insight before, because it also means that in order to get to oversight, to get to insight, you kind of need to start working on it as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, actually, in a way, he understands it also from a point of view of one who is really, really doing it and learning it.
Yeah. He's committing to deploy all the time.
Yeah, but already now the AI techniques in production has the potential to disrupt the entire market.
Yes.
I mean, Google has insights into they could probably disrupt the economic market today if they just ignore the regulations.
Yes.
And I think what he says is he's urging the politicians to
wake up
and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. I mean, I really like that, being able to think long term ahead and really have the holistic view. I think you mentioned it so many times now already, and it's something that more people simply should do. But at the same time, you should not only look at one side of the coin. I think you are an expert in that, in saying how ethical is it not to use AI? Yes. And if we have any chance to reach the sustainability goals of Agenda 2030, we need to do it now, right?
Yes. And I think one thing that maybe is not necessarily dependent on AI, but data, is the data is objective. And there's a lot of truths and topics that we are too uncomfortable to discuss, because when I say something to you, it makes you uncomfortable because it feels like I'm challenging you. But if we can use data as objectivity, then we can tackle the problems and actually address them, because no one needs to feel threatened.
Yeah. And we can have a more informed discussion in some way.
Yes.
Because we have some information to talk about. Cool. Awesome. Oh, Jesus, over. Okay, sorry. I was hoping to be able to take one more talk, but okay. No, let's not do that. That's good. Kye, what's next in your life? Personally, professionally?
Personally, hopefully some skiing, depending on European travel restrictions, or travel just in general.
Are you one of those sitting and looking at what about Italy? What about France? You know, is that what you're doing right now?
Switzerland, Sweden.
So who are you betting on right now?
I'm hoping on Switzerland.
Yeah.
But my assignment with AI Sweden runs until the summer, and we're looking into some grants together with India to pursue some deep learning and agriculture projects that we've talked about before. And then working with some other companies and projects on the side. So still staying in AI.
Yeah. Sounds great. Cool. If you were to recommend someone to come on this podcast, who would you recommend?
I would probably recommend Martina Wallenberg, head of open data at SEB.
Interesting.
Because she has a really good mind and thinking about how to use data to run an entire organization, to kind of go beyond human gut feeling to take business decisions.
That sounds like a really good framing of a theme. How to use data to run an enterprise.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else? Otherwise,
fantastic. Very good.
Always a pleasure to speak to you. It's always you have this kind of informative, and you always I get a bit in awe sometimes how well you can just phrase something in a few words, and it's such a skill that I'm envious that you have.
Well, thank you. I've learned so much from you as well. So
It's always a true pleasure, Kye. I hope you have an awesome continued week and day, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Cool.